And welcome, everybody. Um, this is the fourth episode, and this is where me, David, an amateur dream yoga practitioner, talks about Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga, and anything else dream related. Right now, I am doing a Tibetan Dream Yoga series, my experience and journey with it. And I've got a lot more plans for the podcast, talking about dream related topics. Um, I've been a lifelong lucid dreamer, and I want to use this podcast to kind of talk about my experiences and talk about lucid dreams and dreaming in general. So, this is also a kind of a second part or additional segment to the previous episode in which I talked about the four foundational practices in the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, but more importantly, the four practice times that I have been using and following the formula of the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, along with several other um, resources on dream yoga. So, in this episode, I want to get more into detail on um, each of those times: morning, day, pre sleep, nighttime, how it creates a web of lucidity and links lucidity to basically all of our experience. So, I think what I'd like to do is start with pre sleep exercises because I've talked about the daytime illusory form quite a bit in the first two episodes. So I want to start with the pre sleep exercises, and then I'll wrap around to the nighttime, morning, and then back to the daytime. Okay, so pre sleep exercises include, as I said in the previous episode, recalling your day as if it's a dream, um, setting an intention for the night, and visualizing as you fall asleep. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that first part, which is remembering um, your day as dream. And essentially, when I first started doing this, there was another book that I read called Kabbalah and the Power of Dreaming. And in that book, the author said that they had a Kabbalah teacher that taught them about dreams. And a lot of the book was more kind of philosophical, but there were some exercises in there. And one of the exercises was to recall your day backwards before you go to sleep. And so I started doing that. I found that it was extremely difficult to maintain. The mental effort that it took to recall my entire day in detail backwards was immense, and I found that I was not really able to keep that going. I think I would probably have better luck with it now. Now that I have a little bit more determination to succeed and just more investment and devotion in my practices, I probably could keep that going for a while longer. However, I'm not sure that that particular practice is as effective as what I do now, and I'll explain why. So when I tell people about that, also like when I tell people about that on like lucid dreaming discords, people really don't get it. Uh, there doesn't really make sense to people to recall your day, and that's supposed to give you lucid dreams. Like that doesn't really make sense. Now that's understandable, and there isn't really any scientific correlate that I could give. I could say Well, it's a memory exercise and it's boosting your memory before you go to sleep, and so that means you'll have better memory when you're sleeping in dreams. Well, maybe there's been a study on that. Even if there was, it may not be definitive. Um, so it isn't really something you can say with a lot of assuredness is, what is actually going on there. And that's really what's important. What is actually going on? Most of the time, you can't really figure out what exactly is going on until you do it a few times, right? You need some repetition. You do some reps, figure out what's going on there. And along those lines of repetition, I've also found that um, oftentimes it takes a lot of repetition before you really understand what's going on or have a grasp of how you are able to work with it. In the previous episode, I was talking about using baking as a kind of an analogy. And in a lot of trades, it takes you around 2 years just to be considered qualified, just to kind of get past the basics. Um, and um, you see that in, in job applications a lot. 2 years of experience, but it, there's a certain level of repetition that's necessary before you kind of intuitively understand an exercise. And so I think that's definitely true with this memory exercise. It is not really something that I can say would work for everyone, but I do think it would work for everyone. Um, it's just not something I can say for certain. So um, that being said, I want to go into my experience with it. So, I read the Kabbalah and the Power of Dreaming before I got into Dream Yoga. Like I got the Dream Yoga book back in like 9 years ago, 2012, and I read it then, and it was a lot of mumbo jumbo to me, like you know, talking about chakras and the energy body and gurus, and all of like the six realms, and it seemed like all these practices were just wrapped up in a bunch of Buddhist ideology. So that to me was just like, well, that's nice, but not really worth much. Um, and that's partly true. A lot of it is wrapped up in Buddhist ideology. It's completely saturated in Buddhist symbolism and uh, kind of psychological concepts like the chakras, um, like mantras, seed syllables, tiglas or bindus, like these things that are pretty much foreign to people in the U.S. But once you get into them, there's a lot more there, um, and I found a lot of value in a lot of this stuff, and which is why I decided to commit to practicing it. Um, in general, I wanted to commit to something with lucid dreaming. I wanted to commit to something really, really effective, and I felt drawn back to the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, and I thought, this book has a structure that I can use, you know, and not like a curriculum, but like a daily practice structure. And that's really what I was looking for, is a daily practice structure that I could really sink my teeth into and start, fleshing out my practice. So it definitely provided that for me. And then I started getting into the practices, and it became more than just a structure. I discovered that there was some effects that were much more powerful than I had anticipated. So, In the first two episodes, I talk about illusory form and how I had that experience with that exercise. Well, that also happened in the pre-sleep exercises. So in the process of remembering my day, at first it was definitely more mechanical, where I'd be okay. I'm gonna remember what did I do. Let's see. Okay, so I did this, and I just kind of like remember what happened, um, and that was fine, and it definitely helped up my nighttime awareness a little bit. But the part that really started to get me way better results, and talking about this, I do wonder, and I did wonder, was it more about how long I had been practicing it? Was it more just repetition and conditioning, habituation, or was there actually a qualitative difference between what I was doing and before and what I had started doing? So I'm not exactly sure on that, but I'm relatively certain there was definitely a a, a change in quality that resulted in a change in results. So, that change of quality was I started to um, I started to focus on specific memories throughout the day, and maybe it was in one of Tenzin's Facebook videos where he talks about this practice and uh, something about not remembering everything, but like just remembering more like quality over quantity. So when you start getting into that quality mindset in this exercise, for me, what started happening was I started remember like specific memories would pop into my head, right? And I would flesh that memory out in as much detail as I possibly could, and then either go to a different memory or follow that memory to the next memory. So either kind of hop around or link from one thing to another. So what I found was that emotions that I felt during the day is what my mind was being drawn to at night. My memory was drawn to the emotions. Okay. So in my study of memory, in the findings of psychologists, emotion plays a massive role. It is central to memory. Um, and it's not just the fact that experiences of heightened emotion are more memorable. It's as if memory depends on some kind of feeling or some kind of maybe emotion is the wrong word. Um, it significance. Um, like there's like a narrative that our life has, and there's certain experiences that are more significant based on the narrative that we already have. And so those are the ones that are going to be remembered more than others. Like a wedding. I mean, a wedding is an emotional event, but it's not necessarily in terms of just m- bodies moving around, particles, molecules moving around. The meaning of it is imported, it's not intrinsic, right? And so that event is significant because the narrative that we've built for ourselves makes it significant, right? And so then that makes it more likely to be remembered. So maybe emotion, I don't know. I'm still working that out, obviously. And there's also the aspect of novelty, the first time you experience something. Um, so but the point is, in the exercise, I started to find my mind gravitating toward certain kinds of experiences. And sometimes I would even remember things that I had kind of missed in the moment. Um, and that's kind of the memory side of it, right? So, it's not just it became more than just remembering my day. It became kind of this being drawn to significant experiences, I guess would be a good way to put it. Then, once I get into those experiences, kind of just letting my mind go to them, then imagining them as lucid dreams. Now, this is a very important piece of the practice, I think, because it's not just thinking to yourself, this is a lucid dream. And this is also part of the repetition piece because it took a fair amount of time for me to get to the point where I felt like what I was doing was actually, how like you know it's something's working when it so like when you've done something enough times, you may not really know if it worked until the end. But if you've done something enough times, you'll know that you're doing it right as you're doing it. Okay. Um, Even if you haven't gotten to like a checkpoint per se, um, you'll know you're in the right spot. You'll know like we're on the right track, right? It's kind of how we like to say it. So, um, what I found is what I started with was I would think of my memory, and I do this with illusory form too, by the way. But think with my memory, okay, and then I would think of a lucid dream memory. The most recent is most preferable. And I was okay. How did I feel in the lucid dream? What was the? How did I really feel there? And then I would kind of imprint the feeling of the lucid dream onto the memory of the daytime memory. Kind of like holding those two things in my mind at the same time, and then trying to see the daytime memory as if it was the lucid dream with that feeling on it. Um, so I did that, and that worked. Um, I did feel, I did have that sense that the daytime memory was a lucid dream, and it's an interesting experience as kind of the perception of memory shifts um, into that kind of this is lucid kind of mindset. It is kind of a strange feeling, um, and it can be kind of scary sometimes because there's a sense that you're losing your grasp on safety. There's, you know, this kind of narrative that we're playing out. If you're changing the nature of it, you're not just changing the way you're seeing it or perceiving it, you're changing the way you're experiencing it. Um, I'm kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but it can be a bit scary um, to to have that happen. Um, anyway, I'm getting off track. So the next step for me was after kind of trying to join the memory of a lucid dream to the memory of my day was I was able to I had experienced that feeling so many times I can just conjure it at will, and I can just see my memory of the day as a lucid dream. I can just see the present moment as a lucid dream. Okay, so then in my practice of illusory form, doing that for months is what led to kind of this derealization or depersonalization where I was having that experience without actually doing the exercise. That's the part that started disturbing me was I started having that experience without trying to have the experience. And that's that's kind of what's supposed to happen. But you're also supposed to have your foundation in place to where it doesn't freak you out. Um, so, I went back and rewatched all of Tenzin's videos on Facebook. I went through and rewatched stuff. I reviewed his teachings. I reviewed the book several times. I went through a whole bunch of other books. I went through a whole bunch of other content on YouTube, online, anything I could get my hands on. I dug into the, I found the Tibetan Tantras online. I found all these other texts talking about all these practices. And basically, what I found was that I hadn't constructed a sufficient foundation um, to be able to get into that space, but also maintain kind of maintain a center, I guess, because as you do this, you're um, kind of all of the narrative begins to dissolve. All of the stories that you tell about yourself begin to dissolve. And that, for me, created a sense of loss and fear that I would lose everything. And everything being, you know, how much I value my relationships, how much I value the experiences I have in this life, the enjoyment I have of certain things, you know, um, losing meaning, as it were, this sensation of the meaning of my life dissolving in front of my eyes, right? Um, Whether you like it or not, your life has meaning, and you interact with it on a moment by moment basis. We just don't like to be aware of that because then it feels high stakes, whatever. Um, so, getting back to the practice, getting into that mindset, I was, I'm kind of out of sync with my practice right now because I took a bit of a break. And so I've been really focusing hard on my meditation practice. And now I'm starting to get back into these kind of more intense, um, excuse me, more intense mental practices. And but what I was able to do is go into my memories and see them as lucid dreams effortlessly. And I would go through a few memories, see them as lucid dreams. And the funny thing is the more effective I was at that practice, the less likely it was I would fall asleep while doing it. Because I was able to stay in this kind of, tired. I wanted to be tired because I want to go to sleep, but I also want to be aware, right? And so if you're a lucid dreamer, you may know about wake initiated lucid dream, wild. That's kind of the mindset you want going into a wild, right? So my long-term goal is that's the mindset I want to have going to sleep when I first go to sleep at night, and I will enter sleep lucidly. I will enter sleep lucid, and then I will remain lucid throughout the night. Not necessarily a high level of lucidity, but a kind of baseline of lucidity. And I experienced this when I was a kid. And essentially what would happen is I'd go to sleep aware, And I could sense the passage of time going through, because REM is the easiest time to have dreams, and also like being lucid all the time. For me, it was, when I was a kid, it was exhausting. Um, so a high level of lucidity, like low level, kind of letting things happen as they're meant to happen or happening as they do, um, was not exhausting. That was very restful. I was actually able to get much more restful sleep. Even, sometimes if I really needed a lot of rest, I would just choose not to dream, and I would just sleep the whole night through, um, aware but not dreaming. And I would get very restful sleep. So, you know, people might say you're tricking yourself, you're fooling yourself. Um, you know, well, I'll get back to that place. I'm not back to that place yet, but I'm working on getting back to that place, and we'll see. We'll see if I was fooling myself. There are, the great thing about technology now is that it's become so um, personalized. It's become so ergonomic that there's the wristbands you can wear that senses when you're in REM sleep. You can There's a lot of possibilities there. So the idea is to get into that place where you're seeing memory as a lucid experience. And so illusory form is seeing the present moment as a lucid experience. The pre-sleep memory exercise is seeing the past, your uh, your daytime experience as a lucid experience. Then the next practice pre-sleep is setting an intention for the night, and that is to set an intention to be lucid through the night. So, foundational practice number 3, strengthening intention, involves reviewing the day before going to sleep and strengthening the intention to practice during the night. So, my intention exercise has kind of, I kind of developed my own. Um, So I'm just going to read this paragraph. Then develop the strong determination to recognize the dreams of the night for what they are. Make the strongest intention possible to know directly and vividly while dreaming that you are dreaming. The intention is like an arrow that awareness can follow during the night, an arrow directed at lucidity in dream. Okay, so you're setting, excuse me, you're setting this intention to be lucid. What I've done is, you know, setting an intention to be lucid, I've wrapped that up into a mantra that I've created. And I created a mantra for each awakening. And then I repeat that mantra until I feel it, essentially. And what I mean by I feel it is as I'm doing the mantra, I'm thinking about how I'm going to wake up during the night. I'm remembering how I used to how I did it before. So I'm bringing that experience into the present with me, and like really solidly into the present moment with me, and then setting that prospective memory intention to make it happen. And when I feel confident in my intention, then I can move on to the next one. And I set an intention for each awakening. There's 3 awakenings. I set an intention for each awakening. maybe I should set an intention for the final awakening, because that's one I kind of suck at. Like when you wake up in the morning and you're supposed to review your dreams and everything. Um, that's actually a good idea to set a mantra intention for that. So I've come up with these little phrases that I use as a mantra. Um, and what I find is the mantra helps me get into that mindset that I need to get into. Okay, so I'm conditioning myself using my sensory perceptions, using the mechanics of myself that I have available. I'm using that to set an intention. Okay. So after that, I visualize as I fall asleep. So that visualization could be the lotus at the throat. It could be the Tibetan A at the heart. It could be really anything you want it to be. But I do think the symbolism is important. I do think the symbolism is important because this comes back to how this system was developed. It wasn't developed by somebody just writing stuff down and guessing. Okay. A lot of people seem to think that these systems just were made up by somebody at some point. What a lot of people don't understand is that's how it's written as a narrative by people way down the line who weren't there. And there really isn't ever any true starting point. Okay. These things develop slowly, very slowly over time. And if you want to go back to the original, we don't have historical documents for that, but you can study indigenous shamanistic cultures and kind of see, they're just going to give you a story of where things came from, right? There's no written history there. They're just going to tell you a story. And so to me what seems likely is that these things developed very slowly over a very long period of time. Um, and there's certain ways that shamans found things out. They talk about having visionary experiences, speaking with plants and animals. Whether or not you believe that's true, um, that's not really an intellectual, uh, fact-based way of developing a system. But you know, theoretically, if that's the way it happened, you can see how it could have developed slowly just by the fact that we are able to experience the world. Just us being in this world and experiencing it, we discover and interact with it, and slowly these systems form themselves. Okay? So there was no originator. there, um, anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that rabbit trail. Um, so now I've gone through the pre-sleep. I've gone into the nighttime. Um, are these things effective, right? The symbols that we're using. The first awakening in the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep. The first awakening says use a white tigla on the forehead and visualize that. Um, your pre-sleep visualization is a lotus flower in the throat, and these are all corresponding to chakras. So your, I believe it's the third eye, the forehead. I'm not sure if it's called the third eye. Um, let's see what it says here. So you've got the white tigla in the forehead. Um, so your pre-sleep is the lotus. Your first awakening is the white tigla in the forehead. The second awakening is the black hung in the heart, and the third awakening is the black tigla in the what they call the secret chakra. The secret chakra. Okay. each of these tiglas have specific meaning. Each of these symbols have specific meaning. I believe Tenzin includes the meaning, or at least for some of them. Um, maybe not the, maybe not. So you may have to do some research on that. Um, yeah, I don't think he includes the full meaning of all of the symbols. He just includes kind of uh, the bare bones practice. Um, he says that let's see. Oh, okay. So whether or not these symbols work, wherever they came from, I do think that the symbolism is important. I do think the meaning is important. So take for example the black hung, which is a kind of set of symbols combined into one symbol. Those in literal form are ink on paper. Um, those are lines on a page, and in that sense, they're meaningless. So you need the subject and the object, right? I was getting back into philosophy, in order to kind of produce meaning. The meaning is there, okay. Um, However, I do think that it is okay to swap meaning. If something is more meaningful for you and it matches the symbolism that you're working with, I think that's okay. Personally, I think that's okay. So for the lotus flower is a commonly used symbol in Buddhism. You see it a lot in deity mandalas. A lot of them are sitting on lotus petals. Generally, it's a symbol of spiritual unfoldment, spiritual development, um, and it has many, many contexts that it's used in. The tiglas, a white tigla. If you look at the Tibetan letter A, you'll see that it's inside of a rainbow tigla. These rings, well, those rings are actually spheres, and if I remember correctly, I think it's white and then rainbow on the inside of the white. And so you see the rings in the drawings, but that's a two-dimensional representation, whereas these are three-dimensional drops, bindus, tiglas, where the letter A is inside that white and rainbow tigla, which is has um, I've read the meaning of that quite a few times. There's a lot of ways people have described it, but it's almost like it's almost like a physical manifestation of the clear light, I guess. Might be that's one way to say it. Um, so an issue there is I wasn't raised Buddhist, and I don't have the benefit of understanding on a very contextual level what the meanings of these symbols are. I was raised Christian, and ironically, I'm also similarly disconnected from the symbolism of Christianity. However, um, because of the development of the religion Christianity through time, it has syncretized with enough traditions to where it can have a proper level of meaning. It's just that um, the primacy of Jesus Christ kind of eliminates the opportunity to find that meaning a lot of times. It's like you have a lot of saints in Catholicism, um, But, the sect that I was brought up in rejected all the saints and said the only thing that is Jesus. And it's a very like a single figure is the only thing that is, only thing that matters. Um, and you can get into kind of like a philosophy of religion and what that does in terms of culture and how people express themselves. But I did find it limiting. Um, and um, so when it comes to meaning, it can be pretty tricky. Personally, I have decided to swap out the black hung for a green star tetrahedron because it is similar in symbolism and it's more meaningful for me. However, the more I learn about the hung, the more I learn about these seed syllables, I'll probably use them because then I have the meaning and then I can use repetition in order to establish a rapport, a context, and really be able to use it effectively down the road. So I've kind of figured out how to develop meaning for myself and kind of syncretize things on my own. Um, yeah, and in a future episode, I'm going to talk about systems and kind of how a lot of people mix and match systems or pick and choose from systems, and kind of what I think is value of a complete holistic system versus kind of learning a large context, a larger um, kind of in this time we of globalism, we have the opportunity or the access to information about all these other traditions. We don't have access to the meaning, right? Because meaning isn't something that you can write down on a piece of paper. Um, but we do have access to the information, and so people end up creating their own meaning using certain systems. So without getting too far into that, it is relevant to these symbols that are being used. And I do think that the symbols used are used because they work. I don't think you can say they're used for a specific reason. I think because this isn't based on reason. It's not based on thinking things through and creating logical proofs for why these things work. This whole system is based on experience and testing things through experience, down through dozens of generations of of practitioners that were practicing this as this is what they did for their whole life. So you know the kind of these these generations and generations of yogis just practicing and practicing. And of course, dogma uh, will crop up quite a lot. Actually, Naropa was famous for. I talked about the 6 yogas of Naropa in the last episode, and Naropa was famous for trying to cut out all the dogma and kind of he was seen as a genius because he gathered all the texts he could possibly gather in Tibet and then identified the original lineage and then identified which existing lineages at his time were the closest to the original, what teachings had developed since then, and he created a whole structure of judging which teachings were legitimate, which ones were actually connected to the original lineage, And Naropa really did a great service to Tibetan Buddhism in essentially um, kind of like almost creating this systematic um, theology of Tibetan Buddhism. So, in a similar way that Thomas Aquinas was a giant in Christianity, Naropa is kind of that giant in Tibet. And so, I think I think we can try to find scientific correlates, like what is happening here. But really, the best way to figure it out is to practice it. Just do it for 6 months and see what happens. Um, see what effect the practice has. Um, don't just try something for 2 nights or a week and then think that you've got it figured out. That's not how our brain works. That's not how these practices work. You really gotta dig into it and really make it a habit before you can start seeing really what's going on. So, that may sound a little um, gatekeepy, but that's just kind of the way it is. Um, there's just certain things that you have to spend a lot of time doing in order to understand them and understand how it works and how you work with it. Going back to the baking analogy, it takes a long time to get it to where you know what you're doing and to where you understand the basics, just the basics. Um, and then you can spend a lifetime learning about bread, yeah, and building a relationship with the bread, right? That's the kind of language um, that that um, that my head baker used. There's actually a book called Bread Over Water, written by a Catholic. I think he might be Jesuit, either Jesuit or Franciscan. Um, and he talks about the spiritual nature of bread making, and it's definitely building a relationship with some kind of practice through repetition, through repeated experience, cannot be replaced by knowledge. Just cannot be replaced by knowledge. You know, it, you might want to reference the Matrix and be like, "Oh, I know kung fu." Who knows? Maybe that's possible, but right now it's not. So deal with what we got right now. So that's the nighttime practices. Um, I do think visualizing. There's one other thing I want to get into for the nighttime practices. Visualizing a meaningful symbol of a particular shade of light or color, I think is significant as you're falling asleep. So um, you're visualizing light when you're first falling asleep. You're visualizing this lotus with a white A symbol in the middle of it. Um, there's another exercise where you're visualizing a white A in your heart. There's another exercise where all of your memories in the day, you're visualizing it going out into a white a point of light outside your body, and then coming back in and dissolving. Um, there's a lot of light being visualized, and I think that's significant because think about sleeping with the light on. That is going to make your sleep lighter. You might condition yourself to it to where it's not so light anymore. Um, However, I think there is a correlate there. I think there is. Just personally, um, I think when I was a kid, I intuitively found an exercise of imagining the next thing I was going to see was a dream, and visualizing being in a well lit scene in a dream scene as I'm falling asleep. And I think that practice of visualizing light is effective in kind of connecting the experience of light that you often have in your dreams with lucidity as you're falling asleep. You're in the dark, but you're producing your own light and you're connecting that with lucidity. You know, we're having these dreams of being in the daytime, beautiful sun, but it's actually nighttime, right? Uh, and I also think that the symbols themselves are also effective because I think that what we think about as we're falling asleep follows us into our dreams. Not only our daytime experiences, but especially what's on our mind as we're falling asleep. I think that has a big impact on our sleep. And I think intentionally setting your mind to a specific thought, a specific mindset as you're falling asleep will carry over into your dreams and will raise your awareness. And, overall, I think for me, these practices haven't necessarily been about getting lucid dreams. It's been more for me about raising my awareness overall and just being lucid all the time. So early last year, around this time, maybe January, February, March, those there was a couple, maybe 2 or 3 months, at least a solid 2 months, where I was pretty much lucid in all my dreams. I knew that I was dreaming in all my dreams. Now they weren't high level lucids. Most of them were actually low level lucids, where I would have like maybe a few moments of high level lucidity, and then it would go back to low level lucidity. But I got to where, man, I could sense my level of lucidity pretty much throughout in every dream, not throughout the entire night. I was having some really interesting experiences last year in dreamless sleep as well. But just in terms of dreams, my general awareness was starting to raise to an extent to where I was lucid in all my dreams. And it also allowed me to spend more time in my lucids, to be more relaxed, and to go a little bit more with the flow. Um, I have a hard time kind of going with a narrative in lucid dreams. A lot of high-level lucid dreamers have very strong narratives that they follow, and I've always had a hard time with that. And so this practice has really helped me be able to function at a high level of lucidity without kind of needing that narrative approach. So it's about time for me to wrap it up. So I'm just going to go over the morning practices real quick and then conclude. So, like I said, entering into sleep with, I think, specific symbols and meaning is effective. Um, Obviously, it's not for everybody. I just think it's effective. So, moving on to the morning time practices. So, in the morning, this is kind of my weak link. I haven't really been able to get this piece down as much as I would like to, and this is really just about being able to wake up in the morning and spend some time investing your attention to the dreams that you had and to really kind of give those memories some space in the waking time right when you wake up. Okay. So this is actually a way to where you don't need to dream journal. Okay. To where, I actually have an audio dream journal. I record audio. If I want to record a dream, I'll record it on my audio recorder. However, I don't keep a written dream journal. What I do is I take the audio recordings and I save them onto my computer and then eventually transcribe them into words. So the important part about recall, in my opinion, is to be able to use it the next night um, as you're falling asleep. I actually will remember my previous night's dreams as I'm also remembering my daytime memories. So, in the morning, taking that time to remember your dreams and remember what happened and imagine any non-lucid dreams as lucid dreams is a big deal because you're kind of carrying that through into the daytime, back into the daytime. Of course, going into sleep is the big thing, creating that bridge into sleep, but also creating the bridge back out of sleep is another big piece of that, because bringing those memories whole cloth back into waking life is going to allow you to continue raising that level of awareness in your sleep. Okay. So, like I said, my experience with the morning experiences hasn't been great yet. What I'd like to see is, for me, is waking up slowly, or it doesn't really matter how fast, but waking up and having all my dream memories with me as I'm waking up. Just the other day, I was doing that, and then I decided to doze a little bit more, and then when I woke up again, I lost all my memories. Okay. So it's really about taking that time in the morning to reflect on the memories of the dreams you have and really just sit with them for a little bit. Because when you do that, you're allowing those memories to kind of stick, and then you can use those memories later, um, especially the next night. For me, anyway, I use them the next night, and that way I can use them to kind of further build this bridge between waking and sleeping. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Kind of went over the time that I meant to. So um, this has been kind of going into the four foundational practices and the four time frames of practice. What I'll probably do is go more into the four foundational practices as written in the Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, and kind of get other perspectives from other dream yoga books, and put those together. I want to stay focused on my experience, at least to the limits of my experience first to start off with, and then start getting into talking about what I've read, the knowledge that's out there, and kind of broadening things out. So I do want to make sure that um, you know, uh, as time goes on, I'll start making sort of more varied episodes where like maybe one episode will be my personal experience and the next three will be reflections on dreams from a certain country or region, or going into deeper concepts of the Tibetan Buddhist practice, or going into certain visionary experiences of certain mystical traditions. So it's all going to be focused around dreams, dreaming, lucid dreams. But I do want to kind of broaden things out as I go along. So thank you for listening, and hope to have you around next time. Bye.